You're about to listen to Julie in Genderland. Some of the names and voices you'll hear have been changed to protect the parents who spoke to us and their children. The whole series is available to download now, wherever you get your podcasts. Please listen, like and share. My name is Julie Bindel. I'm a feminist. For 40 years I've been campaigning on the issue of men's violence against women and girls. Now a new threat has turned up in the form of extreme transgender ideology, which says anyone can change sex, and men are women if they say so. And somewhere along the line, children have been caught up in this insanity.
When this neurosurgeon said this to her about being bullied, is that why you're identifying you want to become a boy? And she said, yeah. It was like, oh my God, all of a sudden in my head, I was thinking, oh my God, what have I done to my daughter?
In this podcast, I'm meeting children and parents whose lives have been thrown into turmoil by the abject failure of pretty much every democratic institution to stand up to this ideology and its lies.
Your child is going to kill themselves if you don't affirm them. In the meantime, she's really had decided we are the enemy. And she didn't speak to us for about 2 years.
Welcome to Julie in Genderland.
She did start asking me from the age of about 12 or 13, Dad, would you still love me if I was a boy? And, we used to say, well, of course we'd still love you, but you're not. You're a girl. We'd love you if you were a plank of wood. It wouldn't make any difference,
David and Louise's story started 5 years ago.
And then all of a sudden, the one day, she came into us, didn't she, in the kitchen. She said, I want to be called this certain name, this boy's name at school. And the school have agreed, and they've already started calling me it. So we basically hit the roof at that point, really, didn't we, to start with? And
then we found out that she'd been using the boys' toilets as well.
Boys' toilets as well. All of this was done behind our back.
When he said, I'm a transgender woman, I know this sounds crazy, but in some ways I almost wanted to laugh because it just sounded so ridiculous, like this is this adolescent boy saying, I'm a trans woman.
This is Gemma.
We'd just come home from the school run, age 15, and he just came out with it. I thought, first of all, he was going to say that he was gay, and honestly, that would have, I'd be so delighted if my son was gay. It's the medical side of things, and the fact that he would potentially cut off parts of his body, have parts of his body amputated, and be put on this medical pathway for life. It's the thought that if he was gay, that wouldn't happen. He would be in a community. He would hopefully have a loving relationship. That would have been so fine.
It is really a script. She said, I feel I'm a boy. And we said, thank you for sharing. Why do you think that? And she said, I feel different. And we said, well, of course, because you are on the autistic spectrum.
During lockdown, Zara's teenage daughter became fixated on the idea she was a boy.
She's always had huge problems fitting in, and all of a sudden she's latched on this identity that makes her explain, maybe that's why I'm different. So she came with this really unconvincing story, which, again, it caught us unaware. We didn't know any of that was going on. We just didn't know. And we didn't know how to react. We thought this is really peculiar and distressing because she had just sunk into herself.
David's daughter's mental health deteriorated. She was admitted to hospital.
Myself and my wife were waiting outside, and the social worker came out and spoke to us and said, look, I've just spoken to your daughter, and if you want my advice, I think you need to let her do what she wants to do, which is the reason why she's like this. Her mental health is so bad because she needs to transition. And I'm afraid if you don't let her transition, she's going to end up killing herself. Blunt as that, he came out with it. And he was a very young, progressive, trendy. He filled all the stereotypes. There was a meeting called at school. We had about 20 different people in there, the head
People from different agencies.
people from different agencies. CAMS did not show up at all. Everybody sat around this table insisted that the best way forward for our daughter was for her to transition and everybody start affirming her. And we went along with it because we thought this must be what's wrong with her. And to be honest, we were at our wits' end. Obviously, we didn't want to lose our daughter. And it's the same thing that I've heard over and over again. Would you rather have a live son or a dead daughter? And it's a terrible, horrible thing to hear. But of course, as parents, that's exactly, you're going to do anything at all. So we said, yeah, we'll be fully supportive. My brother killed himself when I was 18. He was 6 years older than me. And so that's always played on my mind. Anything to do with suicide it's just a big sort of knife in my heart when I hear those words mentioned.
Such claims about suicide have been widely debunked, but countless parents have been unfairly accused of causing their children harm, including Gemma.
I remember my son telling me that I was abusive. And I remember just sort of laughing again. I think it's like shock, isn't it? Like me, like I'm abusive. Like, I can't, I'm not abusive. In fact, if anything, I've probably let you have too much freedom. I probably haven't been strict enough. I can't think of myself as an abusive parent.
At the same time, Gemma was dealing with a family tragedy. Her husband was seriously ill. When he died, counsellors signposted her to a local LGBT charity, notorious for encouraging children to believe they can change sex.
I explained my situation because I felt like, you have to take a holistic approach with bereavement counselling even. And they said, oh, well, we can't help with that, but we can put you in touch with them and they can do a beautiful piece of work. And to be honest, I just wanted to put the phone down on them at that point. I thought even now, I can't even get any help with the bereavement counselling because, because then they started doing the pronouns. Oh, she, and I said, no, we don't do that. We don't do pronouns. So
this is the bereavement counselling service that contacted you for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
At a time when you needed probably that counselling the very most.
Yeah.
Having to deal with the hell of your son and what he was going through. And they just suggested sending him to a place where they literally affirm on the spot and then help them live as the opposite sex. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. So I just thought now you're all part of that cult and ideology. I can't even go to you.
We started going along with it, calling her this name.
David and Louise decided to accept their daughter's belief she was a boy.
She changed how she dressed. She started binding, wearing 2 binders at a time, 24 hours a day.
She'd even wear 3 binders at times and put bandages over the top of them because the 3 binders wasn't enough. And
yeah.
At 14, their daughter was referred to England's now disbanded Gender Identity Development Service, known as GIDS, which was run by the Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust.
Throughout this 2 years, all we heard every day was, can I have £4,000? Because I know somebody who's gone to Turkey and they've had the top surgery, inverted commas. And of course, we said no. To be honest, we thought there'd be psychiatrists, psychologists all over her. Yeah. They'd be, there's no way she'd be able to do anything to her body. There's no way she'd be able to take any harmful drugs because of her mental health. There's no way they'd say this person can transition.
She's autistic as well.
Yeah, autistic. She's got OCD, intrusive thoughts. It's just like classic symptoms, bullied.
Autistic.
Yeah, body dysmorphic, going through puberty when all this hit.
We called the team that had assessed her as being autistic and said, oh, by the way, could you offer us any help?
Zara's daughter was also referred to GIDS and to Mermaids, a charity which in 2022 was placed under investigation by the charities regulator.
And the first thing that I heard was, this is not strange, because the psychiatrist leading to him said, oh yeah, well, most of the young people presenting with autism claim to be trans as well. So that was no help at all. He just said it's common, deal with it. And then they referred us to GIDS and GIDS, whatever, gender identity services, which now hindsight, luckily, because there's such a long waiting list, they never got in touch with us. But they said, oh, go to Mermaid's website. And we went there. It's the usual horror story. Your child is going to kill themselves if you don't affirm them. In the meantime, she's really had decided we are the enemy. And she didn't speak to us for about 2 years. And long story short, we didn't get any help from preschool, even though I went and said, look, this is the problem. I had found out which teachers she likes. I said, oh, could you talk to her? And they just refused. And
On what basis did they refuse? Did they give a reason for?
they didn't give reasons. They said, yeah, we'll think about it. And then lots of time passed, and I said, well, what's going on? And they just didn't. My read was they just chose an easier life for themselves. And the help for us would have been for her to have another adult saying, hold on, this is not who you are, a trusted adult.
So every day she was going, there was something new. Then she wanted Packers, which we got her Packers. It got to the stage, remember, she wanted a whole bodysuit at one stage.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
With the actual inbuilt muscles, so she could wear an open shirt at school and everything. We didn't go that far. And then
Do these things exist?
They do, yeah. And then she kept going on about testosterone. And she went to this, when she moved up to secondary school, this other person started there who was also a girl, but identifying as a boy. And they had been on puberty blockers for 2 years. And this was when she was 14 then. So they'd been on puberty blockers since the age of 12. They'd gone privately. So that's all we heard all the time was, I need testosterone. When are the Tavistock going to be back in touch? So I got back in touch with the Tavistock, and they didn't have any record of our daughter being on their records. So we don't to this day know what went wrong. Cam's re-referred her, but in the meantime, our daughter now was coming up to 16, and the situation at home was just unbearable. She was having outbursts. She was going out and wouldn't come back for hours and stuff like that. She was being aggressive all the time. She had to come and live with me in my flat for about 10 months because it was just too much for mum.
Yeah, that was I ended up back in hospital as well.
And, and I couldn't really handle her. She lived with me for about 10 months, like I say, and it was a nightmare. It was all trans. Everything was trans. It was just fanatical about trans. She was just totally sucked into it.
We was referred to the local LGBT services, wasn't we?
Yeah.
And the person there was trans, female to male. Yeah. Right saying.
Yeah.
And she'd had a breast removed
in Turkey.
Yeah, she'd gone to Turkey and had a breast removed, and she told that it was the best thing she'd ever done. Said that, what else did she say? She wouldn't regret it.
Yeah.
Advised her to take the same
route, do it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Don't wait, do it as soon as you possibly can. We were given by CAMS, we were given loads of apps, or our daughter was directly from CAMS given loads of apps to join. All these ones that are pro-trans apps and, affirmation model. Oh, and I must just say as well, we tried for years desperately to get the right help from CAMS, and they were absolutely atrocious. We went to the Ombudsman. We complained that many times because they were just atrocious. As soon as our daughter started identifying as trans, they were all over her and they couldn't do enough for her, and were insisting that as soon as she went through a transition, things would be better for her, all the mental health issues. This was from CAMS.
All the comorbidities would just go. They'd just fade away because she would be in the body she needed to be and would no longer have the issues that she had.
Yeah, and do you remember the one psychiatrist even turned around and said, when our daughter was asking about how many people regret it, or we were asking about it, weren't we? And she turned around and said, well, Only less than 1% of people regret it.
In fact, the rate is unknown. Gemma worked in a related profession and says she was trained to believe such lies.
Until it impacts you, you know, I look back and I think, well, I should have exercised critical thinking. I should have, you know, but I suppose there's a lot of groupthink, and there was just no, as we know, back in the day, there was no debate, you know, trans women are women, get over it. But I did think at the time, gosh, if that happened to me, oh, I don't know how, you know, and then of course it did happen to me. And it was just it's just like change, it's like life changing.
When she turned 16, I researched it going privately and found a now notorious, they've always been notorious, company called Gender GP online. I myself filled out the form for my daughter, and she did about a 40-minute interview, and they said she was too old to go on puberty blockers, so they would now prescribe her testosterone, which they did. 4 weeks later, she got 6 months supply of testosterone gel come through the post. Actually, the prescription, then I had to go and cash the prescription. We've got all the emails from Gender GP. They didn't explain to her any of the side effects, apart from clitoris enlargement and hair growth, nothing else. And they also said in emails that she needed to go on both puberty blockers and testosterone as well. So it was going from puberty blockers, then it was testosterone, then they recommended both puberty blockers and testosterone. Anyway, she started on the gel. She went on the gel she used that for about 6 months. Towards the last month or so, or maybe 6 weeks, she hardly used it, did she? It was strange. She just...
No, but it was increased as well, wasn't it?
It was increased. She was due to have some more. After about 2 months of not being on it, she got really, really obsessed about going back on it. So I got back in touch with Gender GP. They said that they needed to speak to her again. Obviously, all this cost us about £700 up to this point. I think it was £400 just to go through the appraisal, just to be approved, where they were meant to contact our daughter's psychologist, psychotherapist, GP. None of that was done. Nobody was contacted by Gender GP. On this prescription, it said, after your 1-hour consultation with psychiatrist Gonzalo Ramirez, which our daughter has never spoken to a psychiatrist through Gender GP.
Within a couple of weeks, someone had prescribed her testosterone.
And is this from a private doctor?
No,
was it the NHS?
NHS, I think what they do, but they mean the young people, is they Google and they find out the right doctor on the NHS who would, without many questions, I mean, our GP would never, who knows her, would never prescribe her testosterone because he knows her. And that's why she's cherry-picked someone who would. And I said, look, are they doing any tests? How do you know you're not damaging your heart? Or she says, no. And I said, look, she's already displaying things that when I Google, again, I said, I'm not a doctor, but I said, look, it may be because you have too much testosterone, you're depressed, you can't sleep. I said, oh, no, I have no more testosterone. I said, no more to what? I said, oh, no more to a boy my age. And I think, well, so she's, it is so unscientific and so dangerous. And I'm petrified of it, what she's doing to herself. In the meantime, she's obviously changed physically. She just looks as a sick boy. Her voice has changed. She has facial hair. And she's completely resistant to us trying to say, look, can you wait a bit?
For David and Louise, everything changed after a doctor at the local hospital asked a simple question.
He spoke to her and he said, look, can I ask you a question? Were you bullied as a child? And she said, yeah. He said, I notice you're transitioning. Is that why you're doing it? And she said, yeah, that's one of the reasons. Now, she'd never admitted that to us at all. She'd always used the trans script. Oh, I've always felt like I wanted to be a boy right from a young age. No, she hadn't. You couldn't have got a more girly girl than our daughter. No. You really couldn't. She wouldn't go to school without eyelashes and nails on and makeup on. And, You just couldn't get a more girly girl. So that was all this stuff about I was always trans, and that's rubbish. And so when this neurosurgeon said this to her about being bullied, is that why you're identifying you want to become a boy? And she said, yeah. It was like, oh my God, all of a sudden in my head, I was thinking, oh my God, oh my fucking life. What have I done? What have I done to my daughter? I just couldn't believe it, Julie. And then, I came back home and I started researching. Then I just went deeper and deeper. And within a few days, I didn't want to go on with my own life, to tell you the truth, because I thought, how can I live with myself knowing what I've done to my daughter? We'd affirmed for 3 years, nearly 4. We'd been affirming. All the professionals had told us we were doing the right thing. But regardless of them, I should have seen this, and I'm never going to forgive myself anyway. I told this to my daughter's mum, and you can take it from there, love. What did you think?
When my husband first told me what he'd been reading about, I was shocked, to say the least. I found it a bit hard to take, in all honesty.
You didn't believe it, did you, to start with?
But I don't think it was a case I didn't believe it.
But you thought I was going into psychosis?
Will you let me speak?
Yeah, sorry.
I don't think it was a case that I didn't believe it. It was a case of, it was that shocking. It was unbelievable. And obviously our daughter, being the way she's always been, with her temper and whatever, it was like, what are we going to do? How can we take her off it? And I remember my husband saying, we've done the wrong thing. We can't continue to do the wrong thing. So we've got to take her off it. And that was our next big battle, basically, was trying to explain to our daughter why she needed to come off the testosterone. But I think what it's actually done to myself and my husband, because we was affirming for 3 years, I think we feel so guilty. Mm-hmm. We feel so bad. We're just hoping that there isn't any long-term damage with her through taking the testosterone. And it's what it's done to our family as well. It's completely destroyed the family. He was coming out with all these things that sounded so unbelievable to me that I was just like, where is all this coming from? When I started to look at things myself, and that I could see what was going on. I actually lost my own therapist in, I think it was 2022. She resigned. She'd been a therapist for over 30 years, and she resigned because of the stuff to do with, the trans ideology, and the way she could no longer work in therapy the way she did, the way she couldn't question anything anymore. And so, yeah, that had a dramatic impact on us all as well, didn't it? Yeah. With me losing my therapist, just absolutely torn everybody to pieces. And I said to my husband on the way in the car, even now it doesn't seem real that our daughter has transitioned back. It feels like some sort of dream, and we're going to wake up from it. But before, it felt like a nightmare.
So for the last year, when I was peaked and then you were peaked, for the last year, it's been the worst year of my life. And I mentioned earlier, my brother took his own life when I was 18, and that was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. But that paled into comparison compared to what we've gone through with our daughter. I just couldn't believe how I'd been so stupid, so gullible. I know there's loads of parents have done it, have gone along with this, and it's the be kind and all that. And it's because of the way, I suppose, being probably too progressive and too open-minded and too caring, you just don't see it. And they don't realize they're comparing it to the gay rights movement, which was a grassroots movement from the it's from the bottom up, whereas this is from the top down movement.
There are lots of accusations from trans activists saying that, as you mentioned earlier, that your daughter believes that the kickback against trans ideology is just like the kickback against lesbians and gays in the 80s with the AIDS crisis and Section 28 and the like. Had your daughter come to you and said that she was coming out as a lesbian, how would you have responded?
Oh, so our older one came up with that, and we said, "Thank you for sharing. Good news, isn't it? Aren't you lucky that you're born in a country where this won't be held against you and no one will persecute you?" She later changed her mind, but we wouldn't have batted an eyelid.
Have you been called transphobic?
Oh yeah, she constantly, she stopped speaking to us because she declared us transphobic. It is almost comical unless your young child throws such accusations, like saying we were Nazis, we're fascists.
For the last year, we've gone through how, and then about March this year, wasn't it? I said, because we were still using pronouns, I wasn't happy with it. And I kept saying to my wife, look, we've got to stop using them. And, you know, but it was easy enough for me to say that. I wasn't living with my daughter. She was living with her mum. And I said, look, I can't do this anymore. I can't affirm. So one weekend, my daughter came and stopped me. This was back in about July, wasn't it? Last year. And I sat her down. I said, I've just got something I want you to watch, if you wouldn't mind watching. And I tried to show her the documentary about the sisters, detransition sisters. I can't think what it's called. Anyway, she watched about 20 minutes of it and she was captivated, or so I thought. And then she said, okay, I'm bored now. I need to go and speak to my friends. And she got up and she came back in and I said, look, I need to tell you, I can't affirm anymore because of what I now know. It was a mistake. I've done the wrong thing. And she basically lost the plot, didn't she? And then about 2 months later, all out of the blue, she said, I think I'm going to try living as a girl for a while. And how do you feel about that? And I said, oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, you know, are you sure that's what you want to do? Try not to, you know, give her any way out sort of thing. And then, was it the next day, she said to you, she wasn't sure if she was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you told me, and I thought, oh, bloody hell. But she did. That was 5 months ago. And she hasn't looked back since. You would not believe the transformation.
Yeah.
She's so confident. She's always been a girl, obviously, and she's never going to be anything other than that. She's such a beautiful young woman. And we asked her, we said, look, you know, what is it? Why did you decide to? We tried to do it without putting too much pressure on her, because we just wanted to leave her alone, let her get on with it. You know, what was the sort of things that helped you to made you change your mind to that you wanted to detransition? And one of the things she said was she'd been watching a lot. She'd been reading a lot on Discord. She didn't like the way that the trans community attacked people that detransitioned. She didn't like what they were doing to kids, how it affected, she thought it was wrong for kids to be transitioning. She's come on leaps and bounds. I think there's going to be a backlash from her somewhere down the line when she realised exactly what's been done to her. And I don't care if she blames me, because I am the one to blame. You know, I went along with it, you know, so.
Yeah, but we both went along with it.
Yeah, of course. I
Right,
know.
you know.
Yeah, I know. But I should have seen it, you know. I should have seen it.
Well, in my view, you're not to blame at all. You did what you thought was the best thing for your daughter, and you did that under immense pressure coming from every single angle. So I don't think either of you are to blame at all. I think you're great parents.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
But I do want to ask you, let yourself off the hook and have a think about who you actually blame outside of you both. How did this happen to her? Because it clearly wasn't you putting the idea in her head.
No, internet, obviously, TikTok,
School.
all the influencers online, Discord, school, social services, CAMs, 100%. The CAMs are the ones I hold most accountable, and the likes of people that are pushing it just for profit and nothing else. Gender GP.
Oh God, yeah.
You know, and even our own GP turned around to our daughter when she told him and said he was proud of her. You know, our own GP.
No.
Yeah.
So how you honestly could have
And all the
at that time resisted. Your wife thought that you were going psychotic.
Yeah.
And it's because actually you were trapped in a nightmare where there was a huge conspiracy around you with every single institution and organization feeding this fantasy, this utter madness. And this is what it must feel like coming out of a religious cult.
Yeah. It is a cult. There's not, I remember when I first joined some online groups with other parents, and I'd say, like, as far as I'm concerned, this is like a death cult. And people would say, don't say that. Whatever you do, not say that. And in particular, don't say it around your children. And I'd say, oh, no, I won't say it in front of my children. But I was thinking, it's got everything, all the studies that have been done on cults, it's got everything in common. It's a cult, it's an ideology, it's a neo-religion. It's all of those things without a shadow of a doubt. And when we came out of it, when we were peaked and came out of it and realized, even though the rest of my family was still affirming, even the rest of my family were looking at me thinking, oh, he's gone a bit weird. He's, even though they know that I'm a researcher, that I research everything. And, I'd spent a year researching this, a year, every day. I'd stopped doing everything else that I was doing in my life, didn't I?
Yeah.
I'd wake up, I'd straight on my computers, researching, reading, everything available, all the research papers, all the studies.
So you've had the worst year of your life.
Yeah.
You've described it really eloquently as even worse than when your brother took his life. This is something that parents are telling us over and over again. The level of trauma is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And what about the future, though? Does the future look a bit brighter? More possibilities?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's, we've been through the nightmare. Now we're in the dream, because it just doesn't seem real. The turnaround from our daughter, nothing else matters. That's all that mattered. As long as our daughter was safe and healthy and was our daughter once again and came back to us. And our relationship with her now is closer than it's ever been.
Yeah, definitely.
And the relationship with mum is closer than it's ever been, isn't it? It's like she's so loving now, isn't she?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want anybody to go through this. And obviously we wouldn't have, if I could change things, go back in time, I wouldn't want my daughter to go through this. But I think this is something that eventually, when she does realize, when she's able to let it sink in, or when she's able to absorb exactly what has done to her, because that's what it was done to her, I think she's going to be such a great advocate, to speak out against it. And I hope she does. Hopefully the cracks are starting to appear in the ideology. It's just a matter of when, not if, it's a matter of when.
Totally. It's people like you and some of the excellent stuff coming from detransitioners.
Yeah.
And as you say, maybe your daughter will want to speak out in the future, but their testimonies is really what has just put a stop to this dreadful movement. It's really solidifying the horror of it in people's minds that think that they can just avoid scrutiny, or people's minds that actually didn't know this was going on or wanted to put their heads in the sand. Listening to parents like you, ordinary people who are not, we're going through life thinking this is something that won't touch us, or not realizing it would come to your door. Don't just disapprove of it, fight against it.
We're a typical working class family. We're not a middle class family, which is, I see it all the time. It's a middle. I know it's affected, obviously, the upper echelons of society, really, and middle class. You don't see this happening that often in working class, council estate. That's, normal secondary schools, not grammar schools, not university educated or whatever. We thought we were a rarity. And then when there was somebody else came along at her second school that was also identifying, we thought, oh my God, what a coincidence. Imagine two of them being in the same school.
And by the time she left, how many was that?
Oh, by the time she left,
it's about 9, weren't there?
I think it was more than that, about 15 by the time she left.
There's only about 40 people in the school.
It was a small school. It was 40 people in the school. Yeah.
Honestly, I'm
mind-blowing, isn't it? All the flags all about the place, everything, and it was just, and all the rainbow lanyards. Oh,
Many of the parents who shared their stories for this podcast have found strength and support from being part of online groups, such as our duty.
We're the lucky ones. We're the lucky family. You know, I when my daughter first detransitioned, I went back onto the Our Duty site, and obviously I was informing people, and I felt so bad about telling them that my daughter, and I knew it was important. I knew people needed to hear it. They needed to hear success stories. But I felt so bad because I know what these other people are going through, and some of them have gone through is, it's just horrendous, you know, absolutely horrendous. But we're the lucky family. You know, and that's why I thought it was important for us to tell our story, because we affirmed, everybody else affirmed, and we've come out the other side, and our daughter has escaped, hopefully with minimal damage. But, you know, psychological might be more down the line, but we are the lucky ones.
Things are looking better too for Gemma and her son.
So coming up to 17 now, and doing well. Like we're, doing really excelling in his education, further education. Found something he loves. Obviously, we're all grieving, but we're managing. You know, I'm very lucky to have my family around me. And there's no sign of it, and I'm trying my best to do things. You know, get them away from the screen, go out for the day. I'm hoping that we can go on a holiday. And at the moment, there's no sign of it, and we don't talk about it. And I hope I'm not going to get a horrible shock, and I hope he's not thinking, plotting behind, you know, because he could be plotting behind my back and thinking, yeah, as soon as I get to 18, I'm going to get to the clinic. I'm going to look, you know, because he has told me he wants the whole operation. He wants everything. He wants to go the whole way. That's what he's told me. He told me he wanted to, you know, because I sort of told him about all the, you know, if that happens to you. I told him the terrible health risks. So I've told him all of that. And he said, don't try and scare me with all of that. But I have written it down to him. I've written him a letter, and he's seen it. He hasn't mentioned it. So it's like the elephant in the room that nobody mentions now.
So is it, the way that you're describing it, sounds to me like it's some kind of ticking time bomb that you're hoping won't go off.
It's like whack-a-mole. You couldn't get away from this ideology. It's everywhere. It's in our homes. It's on the TV. It's when we go out. It's been advertised on billboards. Everywhere you go, when we look back on this in, I don't know, 10, 20 years' time, we will see this as a eugenics movement that should never have happened. You know, the fact that these innocent children have been sterilised is absolutely sick, really.
For Zara, the trauma goes on.
It's been horrendous, and there are times I felt desperate, really without any hope. It affected my mental health. To this day, I can't sleep, and I worry so much about every single day. And obviously I have to function, and in a normal day-to-day life, I'm calm. But there's this quiet horror that she's been given the means to do this to herself.
You've been listening to Julie in Genderland. In episode 3, we meet David and Louise's daughter herself and hear how she changed her mind. The whole series is available to download wherever you get your podcasts. Please listen, like, and share.